Hi, everybody. Greetings. Welcome to today's Cathedra webinar. Good morning or good afternoon, wherever you are. We're coming to you live on April 29th. For anybody who doesn't know, our Cathedra webinars get their name from the Creek word for learning. And today you're going to be learning about planning for your retirement from your instructor, Shante Moore, who's a certified financial educator with Native American financial literacy systems. My name is Brooke Warrington. I'm the Training and Development Specialist here at the Native Learning Center. We're also grateful that you could tune in for today's webinar with us. Just a quick disclaimer, this webinar provides a summary of fundamental concepts, requirements, and/or procedures within the allotted 90 minutes. The material discussed does not illustrate all possible scenarios that could be applicable. And we also have our copyright infringement law printed here. So just a friendly reminder that the materials are protected by copyright, trademark, trade secret, and other intellectual property laws. Now that you are a member of our system, you are good to go for any future webinars, but you also have access to the past webinars that we've done on here. So just know that all of those resources, recordings, slides, all the different webinars can be found in the courses section. And after today, if you wish to go back and look at today's webinar and maybe share that resource with a friend or a colleague, that is where you can find everything. If you tune into a future webinar or you're advising someone that you work with or a friend to share the resource, you can just instruct them to click on that green banner to join the webinar that's at the top of the screen like you did today. We do typically ask that you join with listen-only capabilities. No worries if you didn't. It just helps to cut down on any audio feedback. And if you have joined and you find that your sound is coming out of the wrong device, maybe you're trying to use your headphones, maybe you have a Bluetooth speaker, something like that, you can click on the little telephone icon down at the bottom of the screen, and that will bring up a list of both your mic and your speaker devices, and you can select the correct audio output. There are different ways to interact during today's webinar. We do primarily focus on the public chat, but we want to encourage participation, So if you have any questions, you have any comments, especially if you're having some tech support issues that you would like my help navigating through, you can let us know in the public chat. So in order to expand that, if yours isn't open already, you can come up here to the messages panel and click on public chat. And then whatever you would like to say, ask, comment, anything like that, you'll just click on the box where it says send message to public chat. Type what you would like to say, and then you can hit enter, or you can click on this little paper airplane icon, and that will send it in where everyone can see it. If you did join and you're unmuted and you're hearing that audio feedback, you can come down to the little mic device to mute yourself. And if you've maybe asked a question that you think we missed, you could use the raise hand feature to draw attention to that. There's also a section called shared notes, and there we have a list of helpful links for you. There's the link to bookmarks so that you can log into Cathedra easier in the future. There's the link to our webinar archive on YouTube. And there's also a link to today's presentation slides, but I have put that in the chat for you already. We would love it if you guys took a moment to just introduce yourselves in the chat. It's really fun to see where everybody's tuning in from, all the different areas that are represented, all the different tribes. So if you could take a moment to let us know your name, where you're tuning in from, your work or your role in Indian country that maybe led you to today's webinar, maybe not. And then your tribal affiliation if you have one. Maybe you're a tribal employee and you don't, that's okay too. And then one quick note while you guys are doing that, just know that if you click on this red menu panel, nothing bad will happen, but it just pulls you out of the webinar and it takes you to whatever option that you've selected on that menu. So I just want to give you a heads up. If you click on that, it'll take you out, but you'll just click on that green banner once again to rejoin. All right, folks, while you are introducing yourselves in the chat, it is with great pleasure that I introduce your webinar instructor for today, Shante Moore. And Shante, I have made you presenter now.
Thank you so much, Brooke. I appreciate that introduction. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our session today. Really excited to have this conversation. Please engage in the chat. If you have any questions, I'll address them as they come. And hold your horses. Let's get through this conversation about planning for retirement. It's such a robust topic. I actually do have a disclosure page of my own that I want to touch on as well. So first of all, everything that I'm sharing is for educational purposes only. Nothing should be considered as any type of advice, financial advice, investment advice, taxes, legal advice. I'll be talking about all these topics, but I'm not giving you any advice. I have to make that clear. for my compliance purposes. I will go through some examples and hypothetical situations, and they are just that. They are just examples. And especially if you're watching the recording and you're not joining us live, in my world, in the financial industry, there's constant changes to laws and taxes with insurance and investments and all those things. So something I'm saying today could very well change later. And you will not learn everything on this webinar. I'm going to be addressing very, very high level topics today, trying to get as much information as I can to talk about this huge conversation of retirement. Oh, and also one more disclaimer that I didn't mention on here. When we think about living in retirement, I'm not addressing healthcare costs associated to retirement in this webinar. I just had to pick and choose what could be most relevant. And also, this webinar isn't just for someone who's like close to retirement. I hope that you're joining because you're like, I do want to stop working someday, right? I do want to retire at some point. And I hope that you'll at least learn some strategies that you could consider for yourself. So I want to make that very clear. This is not just for someone who's about to retire tomorrow. It's actually probably the complete opposite. So when we think about retirement, just to kind of get us started, we really just, first of all, you should know or understand that you are going to be probably retired for a very long time, especially with all of the medical advances that we have around healthcare. People are living a lot longer. And statistically, I didn't put any particular stat, but generally, like when I'm talking to my clients and thinking about how long should we be really trying to plan for, you can expect to be retired for the same number of years that you worked. So for example, if you've had a 40-year career, it's very likely that you could probably be retired for 40 years as well. And I know that's mind-blowing, but it's just true. It's not like past generations where somebody would retire and then they would unfortunately pass away pretty soon thereafter. We are living decades long of time in retirement. So that's kind of like the foundation of everything that I'm going to plan for and talk about today rather in our webinar is, will your money last as long as you do? And it's a huge fear. 63% of people have a greater fear of running out of money in retirement than actually passing away. And this was from a study that completed by Allianz in 2017. And I would say this still holds. A lot of folks are really worried, like, will I run out of money? And if you're married, if you're in a couple with someone, retirement age couples, if you're part of a retirement age couple, there's a 50% chance that one spouse will live past age 95. And I think of all of our seniors and elders in our communities. They're alive and well and still around. So thankful for that. But you can expect, especially women, we live longer than men statistically. We're going to be expected to last a really long time. And that's the number one question is, will your wealth last as long as you do? And I think that's why everyone's trying to, join this webinar, is because you're thinking like, man, when I do decide to stop working, where will that money come in from? What resources will be available? And will it be enough? Will it last? So we got several considerations on top of just the longevity of the life that we can expect to live in retirement. So when we just kind of think about, the savings that we have, and I'll touch on this as we go through the webinar, a lot of folks have, they're depending on Social Security. If they have a job and they're saving into their workplace retirement account, like a 401k, they might have some savings there. And unfortunately, what I see is that a lot of folks don't have a lot of savings and they end up having to re-enter the workforce. Retirement is not an age. It's, in this chart here, it shows full retirement age of 67, which is for Social Security purposes. But unfortunately, a lot of folks don't have enough savings. And, is that what we ultimately want to avoid that, right? Because Most people don't want to have to go back into the workforce. They don't want to have to restrict their lifestyle. They don't necessarily want to go live with their children and be a quote unquote burden to them. And I recognize in our Native communities, we're multi-generational households. A lot of our households are. But I think if you had a choice, you would prefer this slide, which is to have more than enough income and reliable income, where your savings has compounded over time, and we have turned on a level of income after age 67 where it'll just last as long as you do. And even some could be left over to leave a legacy to pass on to others. I want us to dream and think about not just taking care of myself in retirement, but what if I could leave a legacy to, other family members, my children, my grandchildren. We stop dreaming sometimes. We really do. And it's hard. We live a hard, life right now. A lot of things are hard depending on your situation, your background, where you live, your economic situation. I truly believe, though, that with financial education, we can at least make better steps toward getting our finances in order and planning for retirement. And when we think about like how much, are people actually saving, I'll tell you this, no generation is saving enough. Statistically, no generation is actually saving enough. This was according to articles with Northwestern Mutual and USA Today. If you ask someone, how much money do you think you'll actually need in retirement? The average American says 1.46 million. And I'm like, whoa, 1.46 million, that's a lot of money. Some people say if I just had 100,000, I'll be fine. And that could be the case. I want folks to understand, when we think about wealth and rich and enough, it's all relative. It's just dependent upon your life, your lifestyle, where you live, your cost of living. We're tuning in from all across the country. I see here North Carolina, Alaska, New York, Iowa, like Washington State. We're all across the country here. So just kind of keep that in mind. What's suitable in your areas, it's all relative. But anyway, so when we think about, $1.46 million, let's say that's the magic number. When we compare it to how much Americans actually have, as you can see, the age groups, your millennial age, I guess this is millennial age 35 to 44, they actually have about $41,000 saved for retirement. And if you actually go to your baby boomer generation, age 65 to 74, they have a little over $100,000. So there's a huge shortfall, right? Like it's not surprising that people just aren't saving enough. But again, 1.46 million. We're not saying that that's how much you need, but that's what people say when you ask them that question. So I think the main thing of me sharing all this is that, our economy and financial situation today is much, much different than of past generations. Yesterday's three-legged stool is totally different. It used to be where you could have an employer take care of you, right? That you would have a company pension that you could rely on. Social Security used to seem so secure, and we're like, turn on the news and you would hear, so many threats to Social Security happening nowadays. And the real responsibility, personal responsibility, is now becoming more and more important. No longer can we depend on our job. No longer can we depend on the U.S. government. We have to really shift that responsibility to ourselves. We have to be the ones to step forward and say, you know what? I probably don't know all I need to know. And if I want to make sure that I don't have to go back to work, or I want retirement to actually really be what I envision, I need to take on some personal responsibility, not only get educated, but make sure that I'm doing the right things that I can do, the best that I can with my current financial situation to take on responsibility for planning for retirement. So with that background in mind, let's shift and let's talk. I want to go through some educational concepts, because one thing when I'm teaching these financial literacy courses is I want folks to understand, like, no matter your background, no matter your financial savings, income, assets, quote unquote, wealth and riches, what no one can take away from you is your financial knowledge and education. No one can take that away. And I find that people who have less, they actually need to be more financially savvy, because you need to make sure you don't squander away any dollars that you have, especially if you're trying to save that money for retirement. And so these concepts that I'm going to educate you on, I want to just kind of really just talk about, building wealth, because planning for retirement is you've actually accumulated wealth that you will live off on for the rest of your life once you stop working. And so when we think about building wealth, we have to understand that there's some barriers. And again, the barriers is not having enough. It's we don't necessarily understand that there are factors that will affect our ability to build wealth. And they're here listed on the screen. There's 4 threats every wealth builder must conquer. 1, procrastination. Like, let's just get started. We'll talk about that in a second. Losses. Like, if you're investing your money in the stock market in any capacity, we have to understand losses, because there likely will be some losses. Inflation. We're going to enjoy having a good conversation about inflation, which is, a dollar today will not purchase the same amount of goods and services, 10, 20, 30 years from now. Probably when I'm in retirement, things are going to cost different, have a different cost, right? And then taxes, our favorite uncle, we're all related, even though we're all from the country or all across the country, we're all related. And we do absolutely need to understand taxes and how that impacts our retirement savings. So let's go ahead and talk about the first threat to a stable retirement. Now, key word here, stable. Now, I'm not talking about like a rich and luxurious retirement. I'm talking about stable financial stability. When I'm working with anyone, I just want you to be financially stable. I just want you to be comfortable where you're not struggling and paycheck to paycheck. But anyway, let's talk about procrastination. We all know, and I think most of us would agree, especially if you're an older age adult. Like I'm turning 41 next month and having a midlife crisis. I don't know why I'm having a hard challenge getting older. But anyway, I work with a lot of folks about to retire or already retired. And the number one thing they tell me is, Shantae, I wish I would have started saving earlier. I wish I would have actually started putting money away in my 20s when I first got my career, when I first started my job. Do you all put in the chat, has anyone ever had that same sentiment? And I always tell folks, like, don't feel bad about yourself. You probably just got started later in life. That's okay. But the whole point is just to get started. This chart here, I love this screenshot here because it's just a hypothetical example. Like, if you wanted to have $1 million by the time you turn age 67, like, what would it take? Given your age, how much money would you need to put away? And in this hypothetical example, we're assuming that you're earning 9% annual interest compounded monthly. Compound interest is the way to grow wealth. Okay, if you ever heard that term, your money working for you, it's through compounding growth, compounding interest. But anyway, so let's say, I'm turning 41, right? I'll just use myself as an example. If I'm 40 years old and I want to start from age 40, and over the next 27 years, I want to accumulate $1 million, earning that 9% compounded growth, I would need to set aside $731 per month and earning that interest rate. And then it's a good chance by the time I turn 67 that I will reach that $1 million goal. So look at your age. You don't have to obviously put it on the chat or anything, but look at your age. How much would it take? I would say most people get serious about their finances in their 40s and 50s is when they come to me and really start being more strategic. Let's say you're that 50-year-old, $2,088 a month. Like, it gets to a point where it's going to be absolutely ridiculous. It's going to be out of hand. You're either going to probably need another job or business to bring in that income so that you can catch up and start saving. I always like to have people dream. Imagine if you have a 20-year-old in your life. It could be an adult child, a younger relative. What if you taught that 20-year-old the things that I'm going to talk to you about today? They would only need to save $113 a month. So much significantly less, right? Because they're younger, they have time. Time is your greatest asset when it comes to building wealth. You have to give yourself time. It does not happen overnight. So that same 20-year-old could just put away $113 a month and they'll get that $1 million versus me as a 40-year-old. I have to set aside $731. The longer you wait, the more you must actually save. Here's another graphic example of, waiting. This is an example of 2 individuals, Sarah and George. Sarah is 22 years old. George is 30. They both save $4,000 a year. The only difference is Sarah started right away when she was in her early 20s. At 22 to age 30, she put away $4,000 a year, which was $32,000, and she stopped. She just let that money grow. In my example, it's the same example of earning 9% compounded interest. And her $32,000 over a 37-year period grew to $1.4 million. George, on the other hand, he looks really old in this picture. He starts saving at 30. He's in his 20s. Like, how many of us in our 20s had life figured out? Like, we probably barely had a job. We were just getting started, starting your family, starting your career, maybe purchasing a home. So George was going through those things. And he said, you know what? I'm going to wait. I'm going to wait till I get my life a little more stabilized, and I'll start at age 30. He also saves that $4,000 a year in that 9% compounded interest account. And he stopped at age 67. So George actually put in almost $152,000 over that whole entire period. And then his savings accumulated to $1.3 million. So the biggest thing that I noticed right away, I was like, wait a minute, Sarah only put in $32,000 and she still saved way more money, of $1.4 over George, who put in $152,000. He put in almost 5 times more money than Sarah and still came out short. It really just shows the power of time and getting started early. I think if we had a choice, we would all choose to save money like Sarah, right? 32,000 growing to 1.4 million. And it's just a real representation of, even if you're, let's say, 40 or 50s now, just get started. That's the whole point of this part, is we don't want to keep procrastinating. Some people tell me, like, well, should I wait until, let me wait until I pay off all my debt, or my child goes off to college, or, when I'm an empty nester, then I'll start caring about saving money. And I challenge them. I say, no, first of all, there's never any perfect time in life to improve your finances in any capacity. Sometimes we're always waiting until we have more money or a different job or a different situation, and then we'll make those, moves forward. I don't agree with that. I think we should just get started no matter what you have. Even if you have an extra $5 a paycheck, just get in the habit of starting to save now. And then when your financial situation improves, guess what? You've already built that habit of setting aside of money. So then you can increase your savings as your income, increases over time. So again, let's just get started. We can't keep procrastinating. When it comes to retirement, we don't want to procrastinate. All right, so let's move on and talk about inflation. I mean, inflation was huge, like especially during COVID. Like we talked about inflation so much. And inflation is nothing new. It's nothing new to us, not even today. It's nothing new. This is an actual representation, this graph, of how inflation has changed over the past 50 years. And this actually only goes up to 2022. When we first started educating about inflation, it was right during the pandemic. And during the pandemic, inflation just crept over 9%. I'll show you that in a quick second. But if you look at, just historically, we've actually been in periods of low inflationary times. Like, inflation is the cost of living, a cost of goods increasing over time. And so when we think year over year, is how much are eggs costing more, gas, just consumer products that we use every day. It wasn't until, really, like if you look at like the 70s, that stagflation period, I think they said it was three presidents. I wasn't even born during that period, but 3 presidents were trying to deal with stagflation. It was almost 25% back then. I mean, I can't even imagine what, cost of goods and things cost back then. 3 presidents were trying to figure that out and get inflation under control. And then there was a recession in the early 90s. That's when inflation went higher. But generally, over time, inflation has actually been low. And so, but when we look at what does inflation actually, affect, what is the impact of it? Just if you just look at from, again, this was during COVID pandemic times. If you just look at 2021 versus 2022, everything went up. The cost of gas, eggs, cars, electricity, coffee. But what didn't go up? You guys put in the chat, what did not go up? What actually decreased? While everything else in our life was, increasing in cost, our wages, yes, Celeste, thank you. Our wages, we actually weren't earning anymore. Our wages were not even keeping up at all with the cost of living. And that was why it was so hard during the pandemic. The economic times were very, very hard because inflation everything just cost so much more, but we weren't making that much more money, which is hard. I think we have to recognize that sometimes you can't even just make enough. It's like things out of our control will affect our financial situation. So let's look at inflation in a different perspective, because as it relates to retirement, inflation doesn't just go away. It's not going to change. I like the definition here. They call it inflation, the tax of time. Over the past 100 years, again, inflation has averaged 2.8%. So relatively low over that 100-year period. So in one of my other financial classes, I teach a financial concept called the Rule of 72, which basically states if you're saving your money and earning interest, how long will it take for that money to double? We can actually apply that Rule of 72 to inflation. So if inflation averages 2.8%, 72 divided by 2.8 means that the cost of goods will double every 25.7 years. Which is crazy, right? Like if I think, like, again, I'll use myself as an example. If I'm 40, I'll be 65, 66 during that time. And, cost of eggs doubling by the time that I'm 65, that's scary. And that's what we have to plan for when it comes to, inflation and retirement, and making sure we have enough money. Make sure we have enough money saved. So let's look at it today, like what's happening today. So I actually took this screenshot when I was putting together these slides. This was at the end of March. The U.S. inflation rate is actually back down. You can see where it went sky high, crazy during the pandemic, 21, 22. As of the end of March, it was 2.39%. And that was based on the average of a 5-year period. So thankfully, inflation is not what it was just even a couple years ago. And then when we actually even look at more historical data, and you guys can get this was online. You could just, if you just Google inflation rate, you can find this information. But I do put the quote, the source there. If you go to that same chart, you can actually see over time, every month, inflation. What is it? What is it at the end of that month period? April is coming up, so we'll probably get another data point coming out. But you can see I highlighted from on June 30, 2022, inflation had just crossed over just over 9%. And that was in the height of, the pandemic. And as of, again, March 31st, it was down 2.39%. So the question is to think about, what will inflation be when you retire? What will it grow to? And the other thing I want to mention about inflation, I actually didn't put it in the slides here, is that when you're saving your money, and this is, I guess it's kind of similar to retirement, but just in general, let's say you have a savings account at a bank, right? Most people say, well, I want my money safe. Let me just put it in a high yield savings account somewhere, whether it's at a bank or an online bank institution. And they was like, I'm just going to get I want to get the 2-3% interest, right? High yield interest on that savings account. I will tell you this. If you're having money set aside in cash like that, essentially in a cash position, you at least want your savings to be earning the rate of inflation or higher. And why is that? Because if you're not at least earning, 2-3% interest, whatever the rate of inflation is, you're actually losing money, because your money sitting in cash is not going to be able to keep up with the cost of living, the cost of goods. Does that make sense? So as of March 31st, the inflation rate was 2.3%, 2.4, let's call it. Your savings, if you just have it sitting on the side in cash somewhere, you want to be at least getting 2.4% interest or higher, just to keep up with inflation. We're not even talking about growing wealth. We're talking about just to keep up with inflation. And I mention that because of a lot of folks, some folks, not a lot of folks, but I do see folks put lots and lots and lots of money in the bank, in CDs, in savings accounts, because they're thinking they're, getting good interest. And, they don't know where else to put it either, so I can't fault them for that. But is it keeping up with the rate of inflation? So that's just my little off tip there, is that if you have, if you have some savings, make sure you're at least getting the inflation rate or more on those savings. Again, any questions, please put them in the chat. I did get a personal chat about, do I assist with financial projections of retroactive income? I do. I'm going to share I want to be a resource to you all. So I will share my contact information about how I help clients calculate how much income do they need and work through all those numbers. But anyways, let's go on and talk about losses, because when we're talking about losses, this is because we're trying to grow our money, somewhere attached to the stock market, right? Whether it's in the stock market or you have an investment account somewhere, maybe your retirement account at your job is attached to the market. We can't ignore the fact that there would be, losses associated to that money, potential losses. Let me answer this other question that came in. Do I have any specific banks or institutions that I recommend for high yield savings accounts? Just because we're in a general platform, I don't want to give any blanket advice, but definitely follow up with me for a consultation. I, as a professional license, as a licensed financial professional, I have several accounts that I offer clients to give them, some good interest rates. Let's move on to talk about losses. So let's say you're invested in the stock market. Let's not talk about any particular account just yet, but let's just say you're invested. Let's say 1 year you lose 50% of your money. Now, that's a lot of loss. That's a huge loss. I don't want you to lose 50% of your money, but hypothetically, let's say you did. And then the next year you earn 50% of your money. So it will look like this. If you lose 50%, let's say you were starting with $10,000, you will now drop down to $5,000, right? Because you lost 50% of your $10,000. Now, most people would naturally think, well, if I lost 50%, I only need to gain 50% back, right? So I can get back even. Well, if you think about gaining back 50% of your money, what is 50% of $5,000? I'm sorry, it's a lot of mathematical questions here, but let's say you gain back 50%, that's only $7,500. You're not back whole. You actually need to regain 100% back of your money after that 50% loss. So to get back to $10,000, you actually need to earn back 100% increase in growth, which is really, really hard to do. I mean, it's not going to happen overnight. That's for sure. So when I'm talking to folks about retirement, and I'm thinking like, okay, first of all, how close are we to retirement? Like how soon are we going to really need this money to live off of? And then once we determine the time frame, the next question is, how much of it do we need to protect? And that's why it says here, this is why it's critical to protect your principal. Your principal is what you're starting with. How much have you started saving with? Because it will go up, it'll go down if you're invested in the stock market. So we want to protect your principal because as you get closer to retirement, you can't afford what's happening here on the screen. You can't. You are not in a position to take on losses because you will not have the time to sit back in the market and try to recoup those losses. It's going to take time. And so the question is as we get closer to retirement, what financial strategies can I implement to actually protect my principal? What can I do to shift my money from a position of losing to where I don't have to worry about losses in the future? And I'm going to give you that strategy. Now, right now, in a couple of slides, though, we'll talk about it. I just want you to think about that because I can't tell you how many stories I have. I have one client, a native client in Oklahoma. When he first met me, I think he was 66, maybe. And I think he met me from a webinar like this, very similar. We had a consultation and all of his money was 100% invested in the stock market. And I was like, oh my God, you're in retirement. Like, he was already retired. Luckily, he had a pension from his job, but his other savings was 100% invested in the market. I'm like, dude, you can't have your money in the market. Like, it's 100% unprotected. Like, what if the market takes a hit? What if it goes down? Like, you're going to lose this money that you need to be living off of. I mean, and I was alarmist. I was alarmist. I was raising the bells. Like, you shouldn't be invested in the market. And he was like, well, I'm trying to grow my money. I'm trying to grow and grow it. I'm like, look, you're at a point where we need to protect your money. We can still grow it. There's ways to grow it. You're not going to get, crazy growth, but you can at least protect what you have and grow it from there. And he didn't take any of my guidance at the time. He was like, I'll just keep doing what I'm going to do. I was like, all right. And then a year or two later, he came back to me. What do you guys think happened to his account? A year or two later, this was during the pandemic, mind you, not gone, luckily, but he did take some losses. This was during the pandemic when the market started dropping. I think he lost about 25% of his retirement monies. And it was exactly what I said. Unfortunately, I hate that it happened, but exactly what I said happened. The stock market took a downturn and he lost a significant chunk of his retirement savings. And then he came to me and said, okay, Shantae, I don't want to lose any more money. Now let me implement the strategies you talked about. And I was like, man, I really hate that for you. But, thankfully now everything, the rest of it is protected. He'll never lose any more money. But that's the impact, overnight. Think of just even this month. We had April 4th, Liberation Day. And I'm not political. I don't share my political opinion. Very apolitical here. But when our president announced tariffs and what he was about to do, and first of all, he's been said what he was going to do with this stuff, but when he finally put it into action, the market took a downturn, right? We saw like 10%. And everybody started freaking out. Oh my God, my account value is going down. And then they started pulling their money out. And guess what happened the next week? Market went right back up and actually hit its high. I think it was the Dow Jones index hit its highest level ever in history. And it was interesting that people, when you don't have financial guidance and the education, we make emotional decisions with our money. All right, guys, let me move on because I don't want to I can't talk about this. I can go and talk about this stuff all the time. But anyways, there are strategies to protect against losing your money. First of all, we want to look at what can we do to reduce the risk. If you're going to be invested in the market, we have to get into less risky investments or position ourselves to remove the risk altogether. Diversify your portfolio. So this is just not depending on one asset class. Diversification, let's be clear, does not mean let me have an account open here, let me open an account there, let me open another investment account there. That's not diversification. That's just having 3 different accounts open. Diversifying your portfolio is, are you invested in different sectors of the market? Real estate, healthcare, technology, value stocks, growth companies, fixed income products. Like, that's diversification. Also just utilizing all financial vehicles that's available, because it's also not as wise just to sit on the sidelines and do nothing. And have your money just sitting in a bank account, earning nothing, not keeping up with inflation, having very little to no growth. That's not wise either. So overall, don't procrastinate, consider inflation, and talk to a financial professional. I'm going to talk about that. Like, don't try and do this stuff on your own, especially if you're like 5 to 10 years away from retirement. Like, engage a professional to help you, okay? Because you could be missing out on so many opportunities just because you don't know where to go. All right, so let's move on. Any questions? And if you have some feedback, please put it in the chat. I want you all to, I want to make sure I address things as we go here. All right, so let's look at the 4th threat to stable retirement. Then I'm going to switch. I'm going to transition to actual different accounts and some strategies, okay? The 4th threat to a stable retirement is taxes. I will spend some time talking about taxes because we seem to forget that taxes exist when we retire. And taxes can have a huge impact, because the government, our federal government, I would say, it, no matter what account you have open, no matter where you're saving your money, investing it, the IRS, the Internal Revenue Service, has some level of impact in your finances. The IRS determines how much of that money you actually do get to keep, how much you get to keep in retirement. They determine how much you have to pay to the government. They also determine how much you can leave for your children. You know, we cannot grow wealth and save for retirement and not consider in taxes. We can't do that. Question that came in: what is a good rule of thumb for when to move things around? We hear not to jump the gun and pull out assets, let them grow. So as a general rule of thumb, if you're investing, just stick to your investment strategy. Unless you need to live off your money in like the next 3 months, you shouldn't be touching it. Just let it go. Imagine all those people that pulled their money out on Liberation Friday and then they missed out. First of all, they probably bought high, they sold low at a loss, and then they tried to get back in because they saw the markets was going up, so they bought high. Selling low and buying high is not a wise strategy at all. If you didn't need the money, why are we touching it? So what? So what if it's the fact that it's showing as a loss and it's going negative online or on a statement? It means nothing until you actually pull the money out. And if you don't need to pull the money out, we're just going to let it go and let it work itself out. So as a good rule of thumb, unless you're actually about to need that money, like, man, I have to pull this money out because I'm about to go and buy a car, or I'm about to use this money to put a down payment on my house, leave it be. Whatever your financial strategy is, you should be confident in it that it will work itself out. So I'm a very passive investment manager with my clients. I have more buy and hold strategies because, first of all, it's not about timing the market. No one has a crystal ball to know when market will go up, when it will go down. So you need to choose investments that will just weather the ups and downs of the market. Good question. I could spend a whole hour talking about that type of stuff. Let's get back to taxes. Here's a graph of federal income tax rates over time. Historically, and again, this only goes up to 2023. The picture does, at least. From the IRS, when you're living on money in retirement, you're paying income tax rates. I think I did a webinar with Native Learning Center about taxes, not recently, but anyway, you're paying income tax rates. And so income tax rates go up, they go down. It just depends on who's in office, who's in administration. Federal tax rates do change, as we can see. I mean, again, look back into the early, 1940s and 50s and 60s. The income tax rates were over 90%. Imagine you make $1,000 a paycheck and $900 is gone to the federal government for taxes. That's super scary. So historically, when we look at tax rates, we have historical low rates. And actually, the highest tax bracket, I don't think it's even 40.8%. I think it's 37, 39. I'm sorry, I didn't look it up before putting together my slides. And that was as of 2023. I think the rate's actually a little bit lower in 2025. So why does it matter? When we think about, I just want you to think about the country we live in, the times we live in. What are we dealing with, right? Taxes taxes are a form of income to our government, right? Oh, thank you, Brooke. She put it in the chat. I was like, I know I just talked about this stuff. Go check out that webinar, please. Please, please, please. I go all about taxes and really deep into talking about tax rates. But anyway, our government, we pay taxes because our government needs it for public goods, right? To pay down debt, to build roads, to provide services to American people, right? That's what they're supposed to do with our tax money. One thing that I've been paying attention to is our U.S. national debt. If you've been paying attention, you've been hearing just the past, and again, it's not necessarily, I'm not picking sides when it comes to our government, who's in office, Democrat, Republican, I don't care. All we know is that statistically and financially, the U.S. national debt has been increasing substantially over time. Substantially. I mean, if you look at, this is usdebtclock.org. I took this screenshot, 2 weeks ago, 10:53 in the morning. It'd be interesting to see what this is at right now. our U.S. national debt is just, it's just increasing over time. And when I think about our government, they're always trying to figure out, how can we get out of debt? How can we resolve these issues? And one thing I know is that history shows is that one way to get money out of, just to get money to address these things is they are going to increase our tax rates. It's a very likely good chance, if we don't get a handle on our U.S. national debt, and I'm talking about just debt alone. There's so many other issues with our government financially, but if there is no solution, immediate solution right away to address our national debt, it's a very likely chance that our income tax rates will increase over time. Because how else will the government be able to pay for programs like Social Security and Medicare and whatever other services they provide to us? So if we're planning for retirement, you have to understand the fact, or consider that there's a very good chance that income tax rates will go up, which means you'll get to keep less of your money in retirement that you actually saved. So let's talk about, okay, where do I keep my money? I'm gonna pull this all together, all right? And then we're gonna get into strategies. I promise I will talk about some strategies. All right, so let's focus on the right-hand side of this screen. No matter where you put your money, again, no matter what account you have open, it will fall into one of these 3 tax buckets: tax now, tax later, or tax never. And I'm going to show you examples of these 3 different accounts, because your tax now accounts are, and also just like at the flag, red, yellow, green flags, because it's equivalent to how you're paying taxes. I do like the seed and the harvest story that's here on the left side. And, when you just think about, I'm not going to go through the whole story, but if you're paying taxes, would you like to pay taxes on just a little bit of money that you started saving and investing? Or do you want to pay taxes on the big account that all your savings has grown to, the big harvest? Most people would want to pay taxes on the beginning money, right? The little bit, the seed. So let's look at these 3 different types of options. And I put investment account options, but it should be like investment, savings, any financial account option. So monies that are in a tax now position are monies where you pay taxes every year on any interest, earnings, and dividends that you earn. So examples of these type of accounts, pretty much anything at the bank, your checking account, savings account. If you are lucky enough to earn interest, the bank is going to send you a 1099 INT form. They're going to say, hey, you earned $20 in interest. Now go pay taxes on it. Money market accounts, CDs will fall into that category. And an investment account, brokerage accounts, also known as individual taxable accounts. Those are investment accounts. Those will fall into that category because when you buy an investment, let's say you buy stock, it increases in value and then you sell it. That gain is what you pay taxes on. So tax now means when you earn interest, earnings, and dividends, and you get a 1099 form from that financial institution. That's how you file. That's how you pay taxes, because you take that form and you file it with your tax return to pay taxes on that money. Then you have your tax later accounts. So these are pretty much all retirement accounts. So the money that you put in to these type of accounts, you don't pay taxes as it grows and invests. You don't pay taxes, but you pay your taxes when you pull it out, which is later in retirement. We call this also tax deferred accounts. Almost every account that your employer offers you falls into this category. A 401k, 403b, 457 plans, deferred comp plans, your pension, if you're lucky enough to have a pension, will fall into this category. Annuities, traditional, all these accounts fall into that category. So again, think retirement. And when you pull the money out while it's growing and investing, you don't pay taxes. It's when you pull your money out later in retirement when you pay your taxes. And again, like for me, I have at least 20, 30 years before I retire. I don't know what tax rates will be in the future, but is it likely the tax rates will be higher than what they are now? Yeah, very much likely they'll be high. Really, I hate to say this, but any monies that you have in this category, you're basically writing a blank check to the IRS, because we don't know what the tax rates will be when you start pulling your money out later in life. Now, the benefit of these type of accounts, though, is that you can grow your money without paying taxes. That's a huge benefit. So if you have these retirement accounts, especially at the job, and especially if they offer you a match, take advantage of them. Take advantage of them. All right, tax never. Green flags for all reasons, right? Tax free. When you open these type of accounts, the money you put in has already been taxed, out of your paycheck. That money's already been taxed. So while you put it in, as it grows and invests, you don't pay taxes. And when you pull the money out, your earnings and distributions, you don't pay taxes as well. So long as you follow the rules. I will touch on those later, but it's a green flag for a reason. Most people don't take advantage of tax advantage accounts. They just don't know. They don't know how they work. They don't know what they are, how to use them. And that's an unfortunate misstep. We don't know any different, right? We don't know any better. My personal stance is we should have money in all three categories. We should have money in tax now accounts, because guess what? These are very liquid accounts, except the CD. That's not liquid. Liquid meaning I can get access to that money right away if I need to. If I have an emergency at 2 a.m, I can go to the ATM and pull my money out, right? Tax later, I definitely believe in taking advantage of those, because you can often get free money from your employer for retirement. And it's an easy way to compound money and grow it quicker because you're not paying taxes. And then obviously tax never, because that money grows and you're not paying taxes at all. So you should have a mixed portion in all these. I see most people have some in the tax now, some in the tax later, but very, very little take advantage of any tax now accounts that they can open. All right. So when, what does this all mean for me? So say you told me about all this stuff. What does all this mean for me? Well, I did some financial planning and it looks like I can retire at 97 and live comfortably for 11 minutes. Some people are like, I have not done anything. I don't have enough money. Like, how am I going to retire? I hope that gave you a little laugh, a little chuckle. I like to entertain myself. But no, in all seriousness, it means that you're now educated. You have more information. And now you need to make a game plan. Like if you're planning to retire, how can we take all this information that I just threw at you and put it into a solid plan for yourself? So Dana said 97, that's how I feel. I want you to retire when you can, and it makes sense, but I want you to live comfortably for more than 11 minutes. Cheryl said how to roll money into each of the yellow and green categories. Let's start looking at some of this stuff. All right, now for the last part of this webinar, I kind of broke it up into 3 sections. Let's talk some strategies. Let me educate you on some strategies. So first things first, you have to start with the end goal in mind. We have to ask ourselves, when I decide to stop working, how much monthly income do I need to live on comfortably in retirement? Every single month, how much money do I really need coming in so I can pay my bills, so I can pay my lights, gas, get my food? And I'm talking about basic living expenses. I'm not talking about traveling all across the world and doing all this stuff with your grandchildren. I'm talking about when I stop working, how much money do I need to maintain my current standard of living? That's the first question, in my opinion, one of the most important questions that you need to answer before you retire. And the reason is because if you're living off of to maintain your life, and again, basic living needs, not all the extra fun stuff. If you live off of $5,000 a month to pay your mortgage, light, food, gas, all that stuff, you're going to need $5,000 a month coming in from your savings or some sources. We'll talk about those different sources. It's not, the money just doesn't come out of thin air. You stop working, you're no longer getting that paycheck. How do we now replace that income? But the first question we have to think about is, how much do I actually need? And here's an exercise, a worksheet. I'm going to give you guys my contact information at the end. I didn't share with Brooke. I meant to share it. I do have like a retirement, like a 4-page document that I put together to start thinking about some of this stuff. And here's just a screenshot from a worksheet. If you never really thought about it, think about, my lifestyle today, will it be the same in the future? Sometimes we might change homes. We might relocate. We might downsize our homes, right? We might go move in with relatives. Who knows? Will I be paying the same rent or mortgage today Do I expect to pay that same amount in the future? Will childcare be different? Will my car be paid off? Will I have debts be paid off by then? You really have to, if you haven't taken inventory to think about these things, you should, start just thinking about, okay, how much am I paying for this stuff now? And will those expenses be there in the future? It's easy to assume my expenses will actually go down in retirement. Sometimes they don't, because we're doing more, right? We have all this free time. We're eating out more. We're traveling more. And you got to factor that in. And for me, I don't care whatever it is for you, determine that. But that's the question we need to figure out. How much money will I need coming in every month to make sure that I can live comfortable and have that stable retirement that I've been thinking about? So when I sit down with clients, the first thing we figure out is, okay, well, what sources of income will you have? What monies will you have coming in? I like to break it out into two categories: fixed income, and then other sources. I'll go through that. So when I think of fixed income, the way I categorize it is, no matter what, that money should come in every single month. No matter what, I don't have to work for it. I've qualified for it. It's going to come in to me. I put per cap in. I don't come from a per cap tribe. I'm Navajo. I wish we had per cap. We don't. But anyway, per cap, your tribe might be able to fund financial resources to you. You probably already get per cap. Maybe you'll get something extra when you become a senior. I don't know. But usually we can depend on that, hopefully. Your pension from a workplace, Social Security. We'll talk about that in a second. And annuity income payments. These are different sources of income that I, as a financial professional, rely on for my clients to say, okay, if you have any one of these four options, it's a good chance we can consider that guaranteed. I use guaranteed loosely, but it's very likely we'll get this money no matter what. So let's kind of go through these categories real quickly. So what is a pension? A pension is a defined benefit plan. If you have an employer that offers a pension, congratulations, you're lucky. Less than 15% of employers actually still offer pensions. A lot of government employers do offer pensions, but private employers or public employers, very, very few. Anyway, it's a defined benefit plan. This is part of that company's benefit for you being an employee. And what they do is that company, when you retire, based on how long you've been working, your income level at that job, throughout your career there, they're going to calculate a pension amount for you and pay you that monthly benefit every month until you pass away. So it's a huge, huge benefit, because remember, we're living way, way, way long in retirement, right? Remember, we talked about living well into our 80s and 90s. So that's why companies stopped offering pensions, because it just became too expensive. Sometimes you can have a payout option where if you were earning the pension, let's say you pass away, sometimes your spouse can continue receiving a portion of the death benefit. Normally it's half, or another beneficiary, like your child, could continue receiving some of that money. But because people are living so long, employers started cutting pensions. They's like, this is way too much. When pensions first came out, people would, retire at 60 and they would die by like 65. So they weren't paying this money for a really long time. So again, if you have a pension, you're really, really lucky. And we can pretty much, if it's a good, solid pension, I have to mention that I didn't put it on here, but like, for example, I'm in the state of Illinois. State of Illinois is one of the most underfunded pensions in the whole country. I think, if not the most underfunded, I think they're like 0.5% funded, which means that when people actually need to go and retire and get their money, they're not going to have enough money to pay everybody when they start collecting their benefit. But hopefully you don't have this situation. I don't work for a company. I'm my own business anyway. So, but anyway, if it's a good funded pension, it's a good chance that you're going to get that money no matter what. And we can rely on that. And so if you have a pension, you want to just go to your employer and request a statement. You're probably getting a statement in the mail. You just got to open those statements up. And they'll let you know, they'll actually give you an estimation of how much your pension is and what that benefit would be. So we want to factor that in. So for our clients, I'm like, oh, okay, we see on your pension statement, you're going to get, $2,000-$3,000 a month. Great. We already know we have that coming in. So now let's look at how much more do we need to make up for what you need for your month-to-month income. So then let's look at Social Security. So Social Security is a retirement benefit that you receive from the government that is intended to replace a part of your income when you stop working, or when you reduce your hours or you stop working altogether. This is from the Social Security website. Their definition, they also go on to say it may not replace all your income, so it's best to identify other ways to pay for your monthly expenses as you age. So I took an actual screenshot of someone's Social Security statement. You all have a Social Security statement. You can, I shall show you that on the next slide. You can get your information to see what what is the Social Security Administration, calculating for you. So a couple of things with Social Security. You can start claiming Social Security as early as age 62. However, you will receive a reduced benefit. So full retirement age for the Social Security Administration is age 67, and that's when you qualify for your full benefit. If you don't claim your benefit, you actually will earn more money. Your benefit will increase until you turn age 70. So if you don't claim Social Security until age 70, that's when you actually get the highest amount that you'll qualify for from the government. So hope that makes sense. Social Security is a 1-hour topic in itself. It really is. But I wanted to make sure I touched on it appropriately because a lot of people rely only on Social Security. Like that's all they have. That's all they're dependent on. So with Social Security here, this is a screenshot from the website. You'll go to ssa.gov. You'll be able to create an account, and then I underline where you can actually check your eligibility for benefits. Now, I won't go into how do they calculate it, how do they determine your benefits, but basically the Social Security Administration wants to make sure you have what they call 40 working credits. You earn 4 credits per year. So as long as you work the job, paying into Social Security for 10 years, you will be eligible to qualify to receive Social Security when you get into retirement age. And then once you qualify, as long as you keep working, Social Security Administration will look at your top earning 35 years of your income, and then they'll use that to average out and determine your monthly benefit. Real quick, that's how they look at determining your benefit. But when you go online, you'll be able to see your statement. They'll show you, how much income was reported to the Social Security Administration because you pay taxes. That FICA taxes, FICA, F-I-C-A, that tax deduction on your paycheck, that's going to Social Security. Interestingly enough, some people thought or they assume, oh, I'm paying Social Security, so that's going into like a bucket of my money in the future, right? No, it's actually going to pay retirees right now who are collecting benefits. So everybody who's working, who's collecting benefits, they're the ones who are paying for, the workers are paying for those retirees right now. Now, this is another screenshot. This was actually from last year's Social Security statement where, again, Social Security Administration is making a very concerted effort to let people know, like, look, you're not supposed to just depend on Social Security alone. This is not intended to be your only source of income in retirement. For most folks, though, most Americans, this is their only source. I just want to point you out to the bottom section here. It says Social Security will be there when you retire. They claim. Social Security taxes you pay go into the Social Security trust funds that are used to pay benefits to current beneficiaries. So people who are currently collecting Social Security, that's where your tax money is going to pay them. The Social Security Board of Trustees estimates that based on current law, the trust funds will be able to pay benefits in full and on time until 2034. In 2034, Social Security will still be able to pay about $800 for every $1,000 in benefits schedule. i.e., the Social Security Administration is telling us directly they know that they will not have enough money going into the Social Security Administration trust fund to keep paying out the benefits that they are projecting to pay out. That is scary. I was reading a quote. A lot of people don't realize that for SSDI, those credits have to have been in the last 5 years. You could work 20, not work 5, and you lost all that credit. Okay, I didn't know that. One thing I just want to, my overall message about Social Security in particular is that there's not enough. I mean, just think about the world right now and think about our economy. Would you say that more people are working full time today or less than, let's say, 10 years ago? I would go to say that more people are working less hours. They're not working full time. I mean, during the pandemic, we had the great resignation. Everybody was quitting their job. Everybody was trying to be a business owner and entrepreneur. And I'm all for that. I'm not saying nothing's wrong with that. Most people are working side gigs, gig jobs, Uber Eats and Amazon. Like most people have shifted from working regular 9-to-5s to doing 2 or 3, 4 or 5 part-time jobs. And fewer people are paying less into Social Security. And on top of that, we have more people who are actually reaching retirement age and requesting and putting in claims for Social Security. So we have less money going in and more money going out. It's why there's no wonder that the Social Security Administration, they know there's not enough money going into this. And again, this doesn't matter who's in office. This is an issue for decades. This is not a new issue. This has been happening for decades. And every year, Congress has to go into session to figure out how are they going to keep the Social Security Trust Fund funded and make sure that there's enough money going into it. If not, they're going to have to reduce benefits. And the scary part is Social Security is not a lot as it is. Like if you know somebody who that's all they have, they're struggling. They're not living lavishly just off of their Social Security check. Imagine if their benefits are reduced an additional 20 to 30%. So government, and that's another reason why I think taxes will go up because how else are they going to, meet that shortfall? I mean, I hope they figure it out, but this is a constant ongoing issue. All right, guys, I got to rush. I always do this because I could ramble about this stuff all the time, but now I gotta speed it up. All right, let's talk about, annuity income payments, because that was one strategy that could also be another fixed source. Even though I said all that to say about Social Security back here, generally the government does figure it out. I don't know how they figure it out, but they generally do have enough money to keep it going for a couple more years. But 2034, that's right around the corner. That's less than 10 years from now. Bonnie says SSDI is not the same as SSI. Oh, you're right. I'm sorry. I didn't see the SSDI. All right. Again, those two topics whole webinars in itself, but Social Security, do I factor that into my client's income? I do. If I get that statement and they say, oh, you'll get $100,000, whatever age they're retiring, I do factor that in. All right. Let's talk about this strategy because this one is unique. This will answer Cheryl's question, part of Cheryl's question that she answered earlier. So how do you avoid running out of money in retirement? So typically when we are, put inside money for retirement, we usually go invest in the stock market. That's what this equity investment is called, where, you have significant gain opportunity, right? If the markets are doing great, your wealth can increase. You can earn gains on your money. The downside, though, is that you have a chance to lose that money, right? We talked about the losses earlier. But what if I told you there was a strategy where you could, earn that potential upside? We call it the reliable income strategy, where you can still capture some of those upside earnings. But guess what? We eliminate all the downside risk. We don't lose any money. Remember I talked about earlier where we remove the risk, we remove the possibility of losing money. This is that reliable income strategy. We call it the RISE strategy. And on top of that, not only do we get the upside potential, we eliminate the potential of losing money, we can also get 5% reliable income for life. This is hypothetical, not to say this is guaranteed, but this is hypothetical. You can also get 5% of that money for life paid out to you. So this is, when we think about reliable retirement income, one, if you're saving and investing your money anywhere, we want it to grow, right? But we also know we have to reduce that potential for losses. We don't want it to grow. We want to lock in those gains and just let it keep going. And then we can get to a point where in retirement, we can, go to this financial strategy and say, all right, now I'm ready to retire. Now I want to push a button and turn on income and collect income for the rest of my life. That money will last as long as I do. So that predictable income will always be there. And that strategy, my friends, are annuities. Annuities, in particular, fixed and index annuities. And again, I'm not giving you advice. I'm just educating you. An annuity is a contract with a life insurance company. You basically give them a lump sum amount of money, and then they say, okay, thank you. We'll take this lump sum amount of money. We'll try to grow it a little bit more. We'll remove the potential of losing that money. And then when you're ready to retire, we will then start paying you out income for the rest of your life. We're going to turn on lifetime income. So again, an annuity is a whole webinar itself. I know you guys are sick of me saying that, but it is so true. I do have I have recorded old webinars with Native Learning Center talking about this, but I can share ones more recent that I've done. But anyway, I like this strategy for folks who are age 50 or older. And the reason being is because with annuities, this is a strategy that I typically start to implement when people are getting closer to retirement. If you are about to retire, let's say you have that 401k at the job, maybe you have old 401ks that you rolled over into traditional IRAs, maybe you have money sitting at the bank, CD money that's just sitting there earning little to no interest. This is a great strategy for those buckets of money. Because the reason why, again, the biggest benefit is one, we eliminate the risk of losing any more money. And then we can also ensure guaranteed income for life. The insurance company will pay you income for life. Now, how does that money grow? Well, it's dependent upon the type of annuity you choose. There's different types, but fixed and index annuities either pay you a set fixed interest rate, or it grows rather according to a set interest rate, or an index. It follows stock market indexes. So when the market goes up, your account goes up. When those indexes go down, guess what? You don't lose anything. That money is locked in. So a really good strategy for protecting money. So back to my client earlier who had all his money invested in the stock market and he lost 20-30% of it. When he finally came over, because he didn't want to take on any losses, this was the strategy that I put him into, because I said, look, dude, we can't lose any more money. Like, let's take all the risk off the table. Let's grow it, because you're not necessarily living off of it. Luckily, he wasn't living off of all that money, but let's keep growing it until you're ready to turn on income for life. And so this was one of the strategies that I implemented. And depending on what you Google, you can find some really bad things about annuities. In my opinion, that's just, it's people who are uneducated and don't know how to use them who would speak badly about them. They don't make sense for everybody. That's 100%. They do not make sense for everybody. All right. So again, avoiding the risk of running out of money in retirement, you want to look for guaranteed sources of income. In a recent Gallup survey, 85% of non-retired American investors strongly agree that having a guaranteed income stream in retirement to supplement Social Security is critical, meaning people don't want to have to worry about not having money coming in. All right, so let's move on so I can get through these last. Okay, I don't have to rush too bad. So what other sources of income can you have? So I categorize these other categories, this other group of money, other accounts, as other income and savings. So your workplace retirement account, mind you, I haven't talked about nothing about what your job offers you. That's another source of income. If you have traditional and Roth IRAs, those are individual retirement accounts. Those are not tied to a job. Those are different accounts you can open. Cash value life insurance is a strategy. And again, you might have some money in the bank sitting in cash. And for some folks, they just might be working part-time, or self-employed. That's another way that they can have income in retirement. They're not working their normal job anymore, but they're still earning some type of income with other means. So let's go through these different categories real quickly. So 401k plans, this is the most common type of benefit offered by an employer. So those employers who figured out pensions are too costly for them, They then transition to 401k plans, 403bs, 457 plans. They're all taxed the same kind of way. They transition from a defined benefit plan to a defined contribution plan. And the contribution plan part is now that you have to contribute. As the employee, you have to put money into these accounts. Now, most employers may offer a match, meaning when you put in money, they'll match you, and they'll put in certain money as well, up to a percentage or up to a dollar amount. That's free money. Take advantage of it. The biggest mistake that people make is they don't take advantage of these retirement accounts at work and they don't contribute up to the match. Trust me, you will not notice the difference. Because remember, these retirement accounts at your job, they fall into that tax later category, that tax deferred category. So it will behoove you to put this money in. Actually, when you make a contribution through your job, that money goes in before taxes. So let's say you earned $1,000 that paycheck. You can say, I want to allocate $100 of pre-tax money to my 401k. And then whatever's left over, that $900 is then taxed. So it's a huge benefit on putting money into the retirement account, and you're paying less in taxes in your paycheck. Now, if you're a business owner or the employer, they actually get benefits. Like you can have a business of your own and offer this 401k. You'll get some tax benefits. But for 2020, I'm sorry, I didn't actually update this. For 2025, I think it might still be the same. The most you can put into these plans is around $24,000. And then if you're over age 50, you can put in an extra, I think it's $8,000 instead of $7,500. I apologize. I did not go and update the numbers for 2025. But you can only put in so much. Now, I'll tell you this. If you have extra money that you can put into this type of accounts, only put in what's up to the match, and then go talk to a financial professional, because we can help you save and invest the rest of that money elsewhere. That could be more beneficial for you. So a couple other things I wanted to point out about these retirement accounts. Remember, somebody asked earlier, how could I move money? How could I move money into a different type of strategy, right? Like maybe you were thinking like, oh my God, that annuity strategy sounds awesome. But where do I get the money from? You can actually check with your retirement account at your job and see if they will allow what's called an in-service distribution, which means that while you're still working, while you're still in service, you can actually you can roll over, distribute a portion of your retirement monies to an outside investment account, retirement account that's away from that employer. It won't be considered a taxable event, but then you can go and reinvest it somewhere else and grow that money quicker and better. Because to be honest, your retirement account at the job, they only give you like 20, 30 investment options. They're usually not the greatest options. So it would behoove you, if you can, take some of that money out, do an in-service distribution, put it into an annuity, put it into an IRA with a professional. I highly encourage you to do this with a professional so that they can go and invest that money and grow it even better for you. This is usually offered only if the retirement account offers it. The retirement plan, not everyone does, but it does not hurt to contact your HR and say, hey, does our 401k plan offer an in-service distribution option? It's usually for 55 to 55-year-olds. They're not going to let you do it if you're in your 20s and 30s because you're not that close to retirement. But if you're in your 50s, if they offer it, that's when they will let you do it. Another option real quickly is called a self-directed brokerage account. This is where you have a financial advisor who actually, some employer retirement accounts, they'll let us go into your current retirement account, open another investment account inside that 401k, and then we can actually invest monies, using some outside investments to help you grow that money a lot quicker. That's another option. Again, it's a totally separate strategy, but I did want to touch on it because a lot of people don't know that those options exist potentially inside their retirement accounts. All right, let's talk about IRAs. These are individual retirement accounts. And if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat. I know this is a little technical. It is a little technical, but I'll be happy to address your questions as they come. So an IRA, this is a retirement account. It's a retirement investment account. Let me make that clear. Where you can put in money, your money grows and invests, tax deferred. However, it falls in that yellow category, tax later, when you pull your money out in retirement after age 59 and a half, you pay taxes on that money that you pull out. Now, a couple things with an IRA. Anyone can open an IRA if they have taxable income. So like my oldest daughter is 16. I'm about to have her open a Roth IRA when she starts working her job, because I want her to start saving for her own retirement, even at 16. Yes, we can teach our youth to save for their own retirement very, very early. Anyway, it's a long-term retirement account. So you have to leave this money in. The IRS gives you the benefit of not paying taxes while it's invested, so long as you leave it in there until age 59 and a half. So if I'm 40, that's almost 20 years from now. I'm not going to touch it. Otherwise, if I do pull that money out early, the IRS is going to slap me on my hand and say, you know what, Shantae, now that you pulled that money out, not only are we going to make you pay taxes, we're going to assess a 10% penalty on you as well. There are some exceptions to that rule. I don't have time to go through those exceptions. But just understand it's long-term retirement. You're not touching this money to 60, ideally. That money that you put in, it's invested in the stock market, and we get some of that tax deferral. So that's another option. Now, there's two different types. There's a traditional IRA and Roth IRA. Traditional IRAs are where your savings, you actually can put money in and have a tax deduction on your tax return. The IRS allows you to, if you contribute $7,000 a year, which is the maximum, you can actually deduct $7,000 off your tax return. That money, as it grows, you're not paying taxes. But when you pull that money out, remember, we're writing a blank check to the IRS, is when you're taxed at ordinary income tax rates, whatever they are at that time. You can't actually convert these to a Roth IRA. I actually just did this with another client recently. She was like, I don't want to keep putting my money in a place where I don't know what the tax rates are. So we converted it to a Roth IRA. I'll explain that now. With IRAs, you can only contribute up to $7,000 a year. If you're over age 50, if you're getting closer to retirement, the IRS allows you to put in another $1,000 to catch up. With Roth, that money is invested. The only difference is, first of all, you don't get a tax deduction of the monies you put in. But while it's growing and investing, you don't pay taxes. And when you pull the money out, so long as it's after age 59 and a half, you pull it out tax-free, no penalties. Question came in, is it bad to leave your older 401k accounts as is when you move to another job and start a new 401k account? Like just to let it grow and potentially be not subject to the same up and downs of the market as the other 401k. So two parts to that. I don't think of any of your financial accounts like kids, right? Wouldn't you when you have your kids and you let them out in the backyard, do you want them playing in somebody's house over there? You got another kid in somebody's house down the street, and then another kid playing at a house around the corner? Or do you like all your kids in the same backyard so you can keep your eye on them? That's how I look at finances. I think we should have all the monies consolidated as much as possible, as much as makes sense. If your 401k, if you've left a job, your 401k is still invested in the market, and whatever investments you chose, they will be still having the ups and downs according to the market based on whatever those investment options you chose. Now, I also don't think it's a good idea to roll it over into the new 401k because you're limited. These retirement accounts take advantage of them, but they're still limited in the investment options and how they can grow. So it would probably be better to roll it over into a traditional IRA where you can manage that money, ideally with a financial professional, and then we can help you grow and invest it 1,000 times better. All right, I hope that answers your question. Last couple of minutes here, then I'm gonna rush. I hate rushing. Okay, cash value life insurance. This falls into that tax-free category, but thank you for that question. That was actually a really good question. Cash value life insurance falls into the green category. Permanent life insurance. This is not an investment option. I want to make that very, very clear. This is not an investment. You're not investing in the stock market. This is life insurance, which means you got to actually qualify for the life insurance first and foremost, based on your health, your age, is it affordable? But the reason why I mention this is because maybe you don't have a 401k. Maybe you don't work for an employer that even offers you retirement benefits. Maybe you're self-employed like me, where we got to create our own benefits, right? I actually use this as a strategy for my own long-term retirement as an option for long-term monies that can be used in retirement. Permanent life insurance policies have a cash accumulation feature. So you pay for life insurance, the cost of life insurance, which is if I pass away, my beneficiaries get a tax-free death benefit. That's amazing. Everybody should have a life insurance policy. But permanent life insurance allows you to grow cash inside the policy, and that cash can be pulled out later in life, later as it grows and accumulates, and you can use it for whatever you want. And there's no age requirement. There's so many things about this type of strategy, though. You have benefits, there's surrender periods. You got to make sure it's affordable. This in itself, again, is another 1-hour webinar, but I wanted to touch on it because especially Index Universal Life Insurance, called an IUL, not only does it give you the death benefit, you can have like long-term care benefit, you can have that cash accumulation as well, and it actually grows cash a little bit better than something something alternative to like a whole life insurance policy. So again, I don't want to go too deep into it, but I did want to share that as an option. I wouldn't necessarily, if you're younger, I would say maybe younger than 55, it could be a consideration because it takes about 10 or 15 years legitimately for that cash to grow inside these policies. So you really do have to give it time. This does not grow overnight. And so again, that's why I mentioned like a little younger, because you need that time. If you're like, you can get one of these type of life insurance policies if you're older, but the cash just won't grow as quickly as you might need it or want it to. All right, so that cash, that permanent cash value, again, you can use it for whatever you want. Some people use that money for other things beyond retirement. It could be for cars, vacations, weddings. Again, there's no age requirement. But at retirement age, we can actually contact the insurance company and say, you know what, that cash that grew inside the policy, now I want to receive it as income for the rest of my life. Or not for the rest of my life, but let me start taking distributions out as income. And the insurance company can calculate how much you can actually pull out as income. And it's tax-free. It's tax-free income. So it's also a great strategy to use. And that cash, you don't lose. So this is another one of those strategies where you never take losses, you don't lose money. So as you can see, when we think about strategies, sources of income, it really does vary from person to person. Like I would have to sit with you and look at your situation to determine what makes sense, what doesn't make sense, and what savings can we start and how much would they accumulate to? It's all numbers. It's just calculating, if I keep saving my money, how much will that grow to? And will it be enough? So as we think about, again, sources of income, Social Security, something we usually should be able to benefit. Reliable income, like a pension, should be an option. Annuities will fall into that reliable income category. And then your personal savings. So everything else, your retirement account at your job, you have some cash inside of a life insurance policy. Those are all the savings and different sources of income that we want to look at and determine how much will I be able to get month to month, and will it last? Will it be enough? All right, so let me go through this and then I'll share my contact information. So the number one question I always get is, what account should I open? Well, it just depends. It depends on your situation. Everybody is totally, totally different. If you're married, if you have a spouse, with your income, how much can you save? It totally depends. Oh, and time. How much time do we have? That's why I said this webinar is just not for folks who are close to retirement or about to retire. Last couple things I'll share real quickly. As you can see, it is very, very involved. I highly, highly encourage folks to work with a financial professional. I'm going to offer myself as a resource to all of you. I'll share my contact information, but do not, especially if you're about to retire, I highly, highly encourage you, sit down with a professional, look at your options first. Don't just quit the job. Don't just start collecting Social Security. Like, I want you to understand and make informed decisions, because especially like Social Security, once you start claiming that benefit, it does not change. You can't go back and revert it and get a different benefit amount or nothing. Like, a lot of the decisions you want to make the right decision the first time, because we don't retire over and over and over. We usually make, we have the idea that we learn from trial and error. This is one, you don't want to make an error when it comes to your retirement. Just like when you buy a house, we don't typically buy houses over and over and over. Like, we make financial decisions one time in our life, and you want to make sure your retirement planning is done correctly with a professional who can look at your situation objectively, help you put together a plan, give you access to the best financial products and tools that you probably can't get on your own, and who can give you that guidance. I love when my clients retire. They invite me to their retirement parties. They're comfortable, they're confident, and they're like, you know what? I know that we made the right decisions and I don't have to go back to work. And that's ultimately what's most important. So last thing I'll just share is just my contact information. If you would like to connect with me and have a conversation, not saying that, you need to do anything. There's no obligation on your part or my behalf. But I do want to offer folks a 30-minute Zoom consultation where I can answer your questions. If there's something specific that you're like, what does this make sense for me? I'll be happy to talk to you. You can connect with me on my email newsletter that I send out. I actually recognize a couple of names I saw on the list who actually get my newsletter, and connect with me on social media. All right, Brooke, sorry, I went right to the end, but thank you all so much. I hope this was helpful. Please share the feedback in the survey. I'll pass it back over to you, Brooke.
Okay, thank you so much, Shantae. I was kind of taking notes during that one for my own information. Let me take over as presenter. I have already put the link to the webinar survey, the webinar feedback survey into the chat for you folks. If you don't mind taking a minute or two to complete that, it helps us with knowing what's working well, knowing what we can improve upon. They are anonymous, so you don't have to worry about your name being connected to it or anything. We do share the webinar feedback with our instructors, so it helps them as well. And there's also a spot in there where you can recommend future topics for us to try to explore. So we would really appreciate it if you took a minute or two to complete that. We hope you can join us for our next webinar. That is going to be on the 1st, which is on Thursday. This one's going to be on increasing grant revenue, focusing on improving funder relationships. That'll be from Diane Leonard. She's the president of DH Leonard Consulting and Grant Writing Services. It'll be the same time. And if you're somebody who just joined the learning platform today, know that you will not have to re-register come Thursday. If you would like to join this next webinar, you will just log in during the webinar time, and you will see that green banner at the top of the screen, just like you did today. But as far as individual webinar registration, that's not a thing on this new platform. Now that you're on here, you have access to the ones that we've done previously, and you'll have access to all of those moving forward. Same time, same website, 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Central, 12 p.m. Mountain, 11 a.m. Pacific, and 10 a.m. Alaska. You can access today's as well as our other recorded webinars on our YouTube channel. We have a Catheta webinar archive. I do actually have the link for that in the shared notes, and I will copy that into the chat for you right now. I do encourage you to explore that resource. There's a lot on there. They go back a little over 2 years. We encourage you to check out our upcoming training events. We are on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Twitter. We post about them on all our social media. If you're a podcast fan, we have an in-house produced one, the Hope a Thing, a Native American podcast. You can listen to that wherever you listen to your podcasts. Or if you like to watch people interview their guests, we record those interviews and we post that to our YouTube channel as well. There is a Hope a Thing playlist that you could go through if you wanted. But that is all we have for you today. Thank you again for spending this time with us for the webinar. We recognize that you could spend your time, anywhere you wanted. So it is an honor that you've chosen to tune in for us today. I'm going to go ahead and close the recording, but I'm going to leave